There's a very interesting story in the Bible. It's about a man who had leprosy. His name was Naaman. Anyone ever heard of Naaman? Okay. And he was told that there was a man in Israel that could heal him from his leprosy. So he goes on down there because leprosy was the stroke of death back in those days. He goes to his house where Elisha was living, and he didn't even come out. His servant came out, and he told him, go down to the river Jordan and take 7 hydrotherapy treatments. That's what it was, hydrotherapy. Now, Naaman thought, that's ridiculous. You know, I've got much better rivers back up at home, and I expected him to come out with some big, fancy stuff, throw something in the air and say some magic words, and I would be healed. So he left. Well, thankfully, he had some good men working for him. And they said, you know, Mr. Captain Naaman, if he'd asked you some hard thing, you would have done it. All he's asking you to do is take 7 hydrotherapy treatments. So he turns his chariot towards the River Jordan, gets down there, takes 7 hydrotherapy treatments, and leprosy is completely gone. He really thought that was great. Now, why do I tell this story? I tell this story because sometimes when I'm presenting these big disease problems and the programs about these big diseases, it just seems too simple. There are doctors called endocrinologists who spend years and years studying diabetes and how to treat it. There are oncologists who spend years and years learning how to take care of cancer. And yet we, in 1 hour, basically cover what I believe is the best part. There's 2 more verses in the Bible I want to begin with. It's found in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And just pretend like Paul is talking with you. He says, I plead with you, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies living sacrifices, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service, which means it's not all that hard to do. God does not think it's unreasonable that we be healthy people. And then he goes to verse 2, he says, don't be conformed to the world. Be transformed into mind, that you might prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. We test God, and sometimes God tests us. Now, I might tell you a story about that in one of our other 2 meetings, but I really have to get on with diabetes. Diabetes is a major problem. It's becoming a worldwide pandemic. They expect by the year 2025, the number of people with diabetes will double. I have 3 sisters. I love my 3 sisters. I've been in this type of work for almost 30 years. And every Christmas, I send them Christmas presents. It'll be a cookbook. It'll be some natural remedy apparatus. I'm always, and they think I'm a really strange person. They really don't want to hear it. But last year, I was in my little sister's house. She lives near Baltimore, Maryland. And she had her latest doctor's report, the latest blood lab work. You know what the doctor wrote there? Pre-diabetic. You know what my sister said? What can I do? Now she was ready at last to listen. And I can tell her what she could do. And we're going to talk about that right now. Diabetes mellitus, if you translate that thing out, is an interesting disease. Many, many years ago, doctors would see these symptoms in their patients and not know what it was. But they noticed one thing rather peculiar. If the patient would happen to urinate and dribble some of the urine, ants loved the urine. So then the doctors came up with a good way to diagnose diabetes. They would have a patient give them a urine sample, stick their finger in it, and taste it. If it was sweet, they had sugar flowing through their system, which is what the word basically means. Sugar flowing through the body, which it's not supposed to do. It's supposed to do other things. One of the problems is when a person has diabetes at first, there's no symptoms. They just think like my little sister, she has basically all of the lifestyle factors to give her diabetes, but she felt perfectly fine until she got the blood work. Then she realized that there was a problem. But basically they feel rather good. So what basically is diabetes? Another two words for it is syndrome X, or the metabolic syndrome. Diabetes is a metabolic problem, whereas that's type 2. Type 1 is not a metabolic problem, it's an autoimmune problem. And we're going to look at that very briefly right in a little bit. So there are three main symptoms of syndrome X, or the I've already forgot what I'm saying. The metabolic syndrome. Here's the first one. Truncal obesity. If you carry your fat up here, it's a factor. If you're carrying your fat down here in the thighs, it's a whole lot better. How big can your waist be and categorize you as having truncal obesity? For men, it's about 101 centimeters. For women, 88 centimeters. If that's what you are around the waist, you've got the first strike towards metabolic syndrome. But there's other ones also. Another one is high blood pressure. If your high number, your systolic, is over 130, or your diastolic is over 85, or you are taking blood pressure medication, you've got the second predictor of type 2 diabetes. Then there's a third. If you have all three of these, you have an appointment with diabetes. Here's the third one. We've got bad blood fats. Our HDL, which is called our good cholesterol, is low. And our triglycerides are high. These things we do not want to have. Now, there are other things that predict diabetes. Basically, it's a ladder. You've got to go up each rung. The first one normally is obesity. If a person's obese, they've got a big step towards diabetes. The second thing is carbohydrate intolerance. They can no longer properly break down the carbohydrates. Normally because they're eating refined carbohydrates and the body says, we don't want this anymore. When that happens, the next step is insulin resistance. Now, I'll explain what that means in a few moments. But your body becomes resistant to insulin. Insulin is what we use to get glucose into the cell. The next step, well, that's going to be diabetes. You take the first three steps, diabetes is next. What comes after that? Well, heart disease comes after that, cancer comes after that, and many, many other things come after diabetes. It's basically a gateway to many other diseases in the body. But let's start first with type 1 diabetes, or what we call insulin-dependent diabetes. We call it type 1 there. What causes type 1 diabetes? It is not a problem with the endocrine system, and many people say it's a problem with the genetics. We talked about genetics when we talked about autoimmune diseases. We said that genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. You may be genetically predisposed to diabetes. Your mother may have had it, your grandmother may have had it, everyone in your family all the way back to the Vikings may have had it, but you don't have to get it because we have to allow it to come into our bodies. How do I know this? They did an interesting study. They took a group of rats and they made them genetically predisposed to diabetes. They've got the genes for diabetes. They crossed them, and they crossed them, and they crossed them until they were going to have diabetes. And then at one point, a bunch of the mother rats had a bunch of baby rats. They divided them into two groups. Here's what they did with the two groups. The first group, they gave mother's rat milk. They nursed them in their mothers. How many of those rats do you think got type 1 diabetes? Well, really quite easy. There were none of them. Okay, back to this. There were none of them got type 1 diabetes. The second group of rats, rather than letting them nurse from their mothers, they gave them cow's milk to drink, to wean. And at the end of the time, every single one of those rats had type 1 diabetes. So what does that tell you? Just that simple little thing right there. It tells me that there's something, there has to be a trigger that starts type 1 diabetes. It's the same way in humans. They find that children, especially below 1 year of age, if they are exposed to any type of cow's milk, they show antibodies in their bodies against the casein that's in cow's milk. Why? Because that's the #1 allergen in the world. And I'll show you what happens with this thing. We have certain proteins in the body, and proteins are made up of amino acids. There is one that's made up of 17 specific amino acids. We find it in the pancreas, and it is the cells that produce insulin. But there's another little strange thing in nature. There's another one that looks exactly the same. 17 amino acids in the same order, and that happens to be casein in cow's milk. Now, if you are allergic to cow's milk, what's the body going to do? What's it going to do besides make you sneeze and get stuffy nose and all other kinds of problems? Well, what the body's going to do is mount an immune response against the protein. We call that autoimmunity. So it makes some antibodies that are specifically designed to search out a 17 amino acid protein all over the body and to kill it. Well, what happens when that antibody gets down to the pancreas? And it finds cells that are made from 17 amino acids, just like the casein in cow's milk. What's the antibody going to do? It's going to kill those cells. Those cells are the ones that produce insulin. Once those cells are gone, what do you have left? Type 1 diabetes, which means the rest of your life you've got to do supplemental. Now, let me just do a little aside right here. I do not believe that there's any disease that cannot be reversed. Matter of fact, there's a group of physicians right now who believe that even type 1 diabetes can be reversed. But what you have to do first is make sure that every single thing that's waking up your immune system against the casein is out of your body. You cannot have one molecule of dairy into your body. That means no ice cream, no milk, no yogurt, and 1,001 other places they hide dairy products. And then there are cells, not just in the pancreas, but in every organ of your body called stem cells. Have you heard about stem cells? No. There's a lot of things called stem cell research. Stem cells are cells that have not been sent to be educated to be anything. They're just cells that are sort of baby cells waiting to turn into something else. And the theory is that in the pancreas, there are stem cells. And if we can stop getting our immune system fighting our body, the stem cells will regenerate these cells that make insulin. They've already done it in animal models. I believe it can be done in human models too. So anyway, that takes care of the whole thing. So, one of the causes of type 1 diabetes is a child who was exposed to dairy protein before 1 year of age. This is what science is telling us right now. Another cause is if a child continues to drink milk, a lot of milk, after 11 years of age. Now, I broke my first bone when I was about that age, and they told me you need to drink more milk, and I started drinking lots of milk. Then I broke my next couple of bones, and they told me to drink more milk. And by God's grace, I haven't gotten type 1 diabetes, and I hope I never do, but no one needs dairy milk. Why do people drink milk? Can you give me some reasons why people drink milk?
Tastes good.
They like it. I used to love milk. It had to be ice cold, but I loved milk. Why else do they drink milk? Why is it healthy? Calcium, exactly right. Trouble is, cow's milk is also high in protein, phosphorus, and sodium, all of which makes your body drop calcium. There have been a number of recent studies that tell us that there is no protection in women from osteoporosis from drinking even 1 glass of milk. No milk. No protection whatsoever drinking the milk. So where do we get our calcium from? Our calcium is everywhere. Right now, go out there to all the dandelions growing in the yards everywhere. Dandelion greens are high in calcium. Almost every fruit and vegetable has calcium in it. So there's where you're going to get your calcium from. Okay, type 2 diabetes. That's the one that we're a little bit more concerned with, or non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. And it's a major problem. And here the problem is not that the pancreas is not producing insulin. It's producing so much insulin, it's getting worn out from the process. Because, and I'll explain why in a minute, but I'll tell you right now, then I'll tell you again in a little bit. The glucose is not getting into the cells because the cells are resisting the glucose, resisting the carbohydrates, and so insulin rises in the bloodstream, which makes you more hungry all the time, and it damages every cell in your body. These are our energy foods. We need a whole lot more energy than we need building and repairing. And basically, insulin is the thing that helps the energy get into the little engines. Now, when insulin gets into the cell, does anyone know where it goes in the cell? It's rather interesting. The cell, when I was in college, back in the Stone Age, they called the cell the simple cell. They've got textbooks this thick now on just the human cell, one cell. But it goes to a little place that it turns it into the energy, because that's what glucose is. It's like fuel in your gas tank. And once it's into your body, we eat our carbohydrates. The body breaks it down into C6, H12, O6, which is glucose. This is the food for your body. This is what it wants. As soon as you eat a meal, your blood becomes sweeter. Probably every other part of your body becomes sweeter too, because the blood is in, the sugar goes into the blood, the glucose, then it circulates through the body, transferred into the cells, and it's broken down. Here we see it being broken down in the cells. So we get the glucose goes into the cell and is broken into 3 different things. We break it down into water, carbon dioxide, and what we call ATP. This is the energy that the body needs. Interesting thing, a little aside again. When it makes the ATP, once it uses up its energy, it turns into another chemical called adenosine. And all during the day, that builds up in the system. When it gets to a certain point in your system, it gets up in the brain and it tells the synapses, make this person tired. And so it's all the adenosine making you tired. But if you drink a cup of coffee, tea, cola, or chocolate, it blocks the receptors. That's why you can't go to sleep. because now the body doesn't know that you are tired. But it will find out later, and it's pretty bad when you start catching up. So, how does the disease work? You already talked about insulin is a key that opens up the cell and allows the glucose in. So let's just pretend this is the surface of your cells. All these little receptor sites waiting for the glucose, the insulin to come, open the door to allow the glucose to get in. In one cell in your body, there are approximately 20,000 receptor sites for every single cell. That's a lot of energy getting into your cells. But if your body becomes insulin resistant, the body says, we don't want any more of this going on. What it does, it takes away some of the receptor sites, and now it might drop down to 5,000. And when it drops down to 5,000, you do not have very good health, and you're tired all the time. Good news is, all along the way to diabetes, there are warning signs. If we could just learn what the warning signs are, we would miss our appointment with diabetes. Here's one of the first ones. Always hungry. Well, why would you be always hungry? The body, the cells in the body need glucose. But if they have closed the door to the glucose, the cells keep sending messages to the brain, feed me, I am hungry. And so the person with diabetes is hungry all the time. And trouble is, that seems to make them gain more weight because where's it going to go? It's going to turn into fat. Trouble is also, as the blood is 93% water, sugar starts collecting in the bloodstream. And the body says, this is wrong. We've got to get rid of all of this sugar. And so it starts to dump sugar, and you go to the toilet a lot. So first thing, a person is always hungry. The second thing, to get rid of the sugar, you're always going to urinate. Trouble is, we need to get some water in our bodies because we are, whoops, there's some sugar into the toilet. Sorry for Spanish there, 93% water. So a person then is always thirsty. Those are the main three signs of type 2 diabetes. Always hungry, always urinating, and always thirsty. And it goes around, and it goes around, and it goes around. And the whole time it's doing this, it's damaging every organ in your body. But it gets even worse. Your blood vessels, your heart, your kidneys, your nerves, and your brain don't need insulin. The glucose can go right in there. Trouble is, when the glucose goes into these cells, except for the brain, if somehow the brain is protected by the blood-brain barrier, when you get a whole lot of glucose in the blood vessel walls, or the kidneys, or the heart, or the nerves, you start getting damage to these things. And the damage is going to cause some major problems. We're going to look at those right now. People with diabetes, having excess sugar in the blood hurts the whole body. It's the number 6 cause of death in the United States today. Diabetes is. It greatly increases your risk of atherosclerosis. At the same time, then, it's going to start affecting your heart and increasing your risk of heart attacks by 2 to 4 times. So a person with diabetes has an appointment with heart attack. Also, strokes increases the risk of strokes between 200 and 400%. The eyes. Diabetes is one of the leading causes of blindness in the world today. Why? Because you've got the fine little nerves and blood vessels in the back of your eye. The glucose, which does not need insulin, destroys those things, and you become blind. It increases your risk of kidney disease, because it doesn't need insulin, by 1,800%. Many diabetics are on dialysis. They've got to go in 3 times a week, hook their bodies to a machine, bring all the blood out, clean it, and put it back in again. the rest of their lives. Not a very nice thing. It is a major cause of amputations for the same reason. You don't have good circulation. If you don't have good circulation, you're going to lose your limbs. Wounds that will not heal. Now, I've already talked about this wound right here. This lady had diabetes. She was grossly overweight, but we worked very hard on her, changing her lifestyle and treating the wound until it was completely healed. It also causes, for men, impotence. They can no longer have sexual relations, and for women, increases their risk of breast and uterine cancers. All that for diabetes. So what do we do to invite this into our lives? First of all, overweight. If we're overweight, we are inviting it into our lives. So we should move in the direction of not so much weight on the body. The other one is too much fat in the diet. You like fat in your diet? I like fat in my diet. I love fried foods. Don't eat them, but I love the fried foods. They did an interesting study. I think you'll enjoy this little study. They put a group of people on 65% of their calories coming from fat. 35% of their calories coming from proteins and carbohydrates. They had them on this diet for just 2 weeks. Not very long. And let me tell you something else. Many people, they are taking at least 50% of their calories in fat today. So they are opening up the door, because here's what happened. At the end of 2 weeks, every single person was pre-diabetic. Every single one had the symptoms that they were getting diabetes. Now, did they get diabetes? No. The minute they got off of that diet, and the body recovered them. If you are getting the early stages of diabetes, correct the problem right now, and it will reverse itself. Now, here's the second part. They had another group of people. They put them on 450 grams of sugar a day for 11 weeks. That's a long time. I couldn't survive on that. And only 10% fat in their diet. At the end of 11 weeks, not one pre-diabetic in the group. We seem to think that diabetes is caused by sugar. Yes, if you eat too much sugar, it's not good for you. But it's the fat in our diet that opens the door the widest. We've got to get away from the fat. And I asked you the question the other day, why do we eat fat in our diets? Let me give you an example. I was working with a group of Koreans a number of years ago, and they lived in the state of Georgia. So I drove there. It's about a 5-hour drive. And I ate with the patients. All of them were on a salt-free diet. Do you like a salt-free diet? It was pretty insipid. First few days, I had to choke it down. After a week, it wasn't too bad. After 2 weeks, and I was there for 2 weeks, I didn't tell the difference. It was quite good. And then I remember the last morning, I had breakfast. We had a farewell meeting. I got in my truck, and I headed back to my home. I got there just in time for lunch. I'm a bachelor, so I go to the cupboard. I bring out a can of beans. I open a can of beans. I put them in a pot. I heat them up. When they're heated, put them on my plate. And I took one bite of my canned beans, and I spit them out. Why? If you eat anything from a can, unless it specifically says low salt, it's going to be high salt. And after 2 weeks away from the salt, I was very sensitive to too much salt in my diet. We need, and it's the same way with fat. I'm amazed. A good, healthy diet does not need fat. My favorite fat, if I'm going to put fat on my food, my favorite fat is an avocado. This is fat, butter or margarine. If you are pre-diabetic, if you have obesity in the upper part of your body, you do not need butter, you do not need margarine. Of course you do not need fried foods. I understand Kentucky Fried Chicken is found its way to Iceland. If you are eating fried foods, and some of you are, it's almost the same as just drinking the oil. Because it is saturated with oil. So when you eat the fried food, the Kentucky Fried Chicken, the French fries, the Big Mac hamburgers, you are taking a large amount of fat into your body, which is going to make your cells resistant to insulin, which is going to step you a few steps closer to being the next people on your block with type 2 diabetes. Salad oils. I mean, I like salad. I like salad oil sometimes, but I'd rather go with, like I say, avocado, or just learn to eat it without oil. Again, it's just a taste thing. Cooking fats. People like to put a lot of oil in their food. They don't need it. Mayonnaise. Peanut butter. Oh, now that's hard. Peanut butter. Let me ask you a question. Can I eat peanut butter? Why? I don't have truncal obesity. My blood pressure is way low. My blood fats are beautiful. So I can have muy poquito. I can have a little bit of peanut butter or tahini or other types of nut butters or seed butters. Another thing that's going to lead a person to invite the disease in is when they're in a sedentary job or sedentary lifestyle. And some of us, that's our job. If you are in a sedentary job, you have to find at least 1 hour a day where you get outside and you exercise. It's not an option. You've got to do it, yes.
I have a question. So what do you eat? No, you say everything.
I'll show you. I'm going to show you some slides, those things you can eat, okay? That's a good question. I get it all the time. When I talk to people about becoming a total vegetarian, their question is, what do I eat? Well, my thoughts are, you go to the table, and everything that's not a dead animal, you eat that. You got potatoes, you got salad, you got whatever else is there, and you can do quite well. Now, the Vikings, whenever they came here way back then, they probably had a pretty big meat-based diet because they weren't growing a lot of crops. What do you think their lifespan was? Very, very short. You know, these people, 35, 40 years old, were already reaching the top of their range in lifespan because animal products are not made to perpetuate life. If we just go back to the book of Genesis, after the flood, before the flood, the oldest person recorded in the Bible was 969 years old. That's a long, long life. Noah lived to be 950 years old. But as soon as the flood was over, you can track the generations going down, down, down. Abraham lived to be 175 years old. When he was 35 years old, Shem, the son of Noah, died. That's 10 generations away. He was still alive after 10 generations. And basically, lifespans have continued to go down. They're going back up a little bit right now in certain places. And I congratulate you. Your lifespans are very nice here in Iceland. But that's not important. What's important? That your lifespan is good. You've got friends. I know all of you have friends who've already gone. And some of them weren't as old as you were. Sometimes you wonder, who selects? Why is this? I don't know. I can't answer that question. But I know that we need to do the very best that we can. This is from Life Clinic Health Management Systems article, Diabetes and Exercise. It says if a person combines a good diet with exercise, they can get off of medications. I believe, my own personal belief, type 2 diabetes is curable. You don't have to have type 2 diabetes. All you've got to do is correct the things that you were doing wrong, and the body will respond in kind to restore the health of your body. Another thing that's very, very